The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guest, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's guest is Joseph Liu, and he's going to talk to us about his near-death experience that led ultimately to him becoming a career change consultant. Let's welcome Joseph. Hi, Joseph. How are you?
Hi, Andrea. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So let's just dive right in. You had a collapsed lung. Let's share that story, how this began.
All right. So I am originally from Springfield, Missouri, which is where
Okay.
I grew up. And when I was in high school, I played on the high school tennis team. And I remember one day I felt this sharp pain go through my chest, and I had no idea what it was. I assumed it was nothing, but it became very difficult for me to breathe.
Mhm.
And so I got it checked out, and the doctor at the time ended up diagnosing it as an inflamed sternum from
Okay.
just playing tennis.
I had that
A-
too, actually, throughout my life of all the misdiagnoses and things. Yeah, it was like, "Oh, I think it's just some pain right there." I'm like, "Well, that doesn't feel exactly where it is, but okay."
Yeah, inflamed sternum, it does
Yeah.
happen. I could see why they might think that because I had been playing quite aggressively at that time. I played a lot of tennis. So went back to playing tennis. It got worse. One day the coach said it looked like I was struggling to catch my breath. I got it checked out again. And very similar to the story that you shared in your original episode, it was misdiagnosed again. And they took an x-ray, misdiagnosed it as nothing. And it got to a point where there was a pretty significant collapse. And it wasn't until I saw a different doctor, had requested a different type of x-ray be done, that they then rushed me off to the emergency
Mhm.
room. But with it going on for so long untreated, and for me to continue to play quite intense sport at the time, it had actually collapsed quite significantly. And it was at a point where, in most cases, that degree of collapse can actually result in death
Mhm.
and heart failure because your lung starts to press up against your heart.
Mhm.
And fortunately, I was able to have surgery. Very similar to you. I went into the surgery. They told me there's one of two outcomes: either a thoracoscopy, where they have to do a minor surgery to reinflate and reattach the lung, or a more significant thoracotomy, which I know you're familiar with. And this is not something I would know until I woke up. And just like you, the very first question I asked when I woke up was, "Did you guys have to do a thoracotomy?" They didn't. But the whole thing was quite scary for me as a 17-year-old, and
Mhm.
both the misdiagnoses from the doctors originally, and also just really understanding the fragility of life. That's what got me originally heading down the medical school path, and my
Yeah.
initial desire to become a doctor.
I wanna talk about your experience a little bit just because I know for me, it's a personality thing too, and especially when you're younger, you're kind of taught to suck it up, move on, we gotta keep going, and because, I mean, kids do kind of whine a lot over
Yep.
things that aren't really a big deal, right? And so I think there's that fine line between
like helping them pick themselves up and keep moving with, okay, wait a minute, like I'm really going to believe everything that they're saying. I mean, you want to believe a child and you want to, or even an adult, you want to believe them, but we all are characteristically a little bit different. And sometimes some people are known to be a little bit more of a complainer than others. And so then they're taken less seriously. And unfortunately, I think doctors are more used to having complainers than anything, right? People
Mhm.
come in freaking out. Well, and like you said, the fragility of life. When people
Yeah.
recognize that, they go running to the doctor. And I think doctors see a lot of that. They see a lot of people coming in thinking they're dying or it's something serious. And especially nowadays with
For
Google,
sure.
it's
Yeah.
like, Google says I'm going to die tomorrow. So you have to get me in. And so sometimes they don't see the whole picture, and
Yeah.
it's a complex thing. You have to really know yourself and push a doctor when you feel like they aren't seeing and hearing you as you think they should.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I remember at the time, as you described, I just kind of tried to power through it. And I was a competitive varsity tennis player at the time. I remember the moment when it occurred to me that something was wrong. And it was actually my coach during the drills telling me I needed to pick up the pace because I wasn't running fast enough. And I remember telling him, I said, Coach, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I've got some sort of like air pocket in my chest. And I cannot run any faster right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually the one who encouraged me to get it checked out again. I think it's very easy to, I guess, as a patient, critique doctors' diagnoses. These are doctors who see thousands of patients each year. I know that
Mm-hmm.
they probably get the majority of diagnoses correct.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you that when you're the patient, sometimes you just know when something's off, and you
Mm-hmm.
know that in spite of their years and years of medical training, you know your body best.
Yeah.
And if you feel like something's off, it's worth getting a second opinion on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for all the things I've been through, I just know when it's something serious versus it's a cold, it's a flu bug, it's a hiccup with something.
Right.
In your gut. And I think it's really important that people speak up with their doctors and explain that. But your story, your tennis story reminded me of this time I was with a friend and we were in Hawaii surfing. And I was struggling. I had a pacemaker already at the time, but there's still something else that doctors haven't quite figured out with my muscles and their response. And so I was struggling to surf and I was doing it, but it was clearly a lot of work.
Yeah.
And the surf instructor was making fun of me to my friend, and she was like, "Dude, she's got a pacemaker." And he
Yeah,
felt
you give her
so bad. He was like, "Wow,
yeah,
I feel like such an a-hole." But yeah, we can look one way on the outside, and I think that's a problem for doctors too, right? They see you
yeah,
and you look super fit, and so it's like,
right,
"Oh, how bad could this be? Surely this is just
right.
something minor."
And it's actually really kind of ironic because it's not until your health condition gets so bad to the point
Yeah.
where it's like really blatantly noticeable
Mhm.
to where it then becomes easy to diagnose. So
Mhm.
that's the catch is when you see these sort of minor things coming up, that's actually the best time to get it checked out, to get it treated. But it's also the least likely to be caught and to be noticed and to be taken seriously.
It's funny you say that because I actually tend to max out on the symptoms before I even bother going in because
Oh,
I
I
feel
see.
that
Yeah.
so much that they're not going to figure it out if it's too minor, and I need it to be a little more exacerbated for them to be able to figure it out. So, I mean, yes, it's ideal to go in when it's, on the minor side, but in my own experience, it's just been more difficult for them to actually diagnose it until it's more extreme. Okay, so you go through all this and you're thinking, I want to help people get diagnosed. So you go to med
Exactly.
school. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I felt like that was a sign. That's exactly how I perceived that whole experience. It was probably, I've had a couple surgeries since then, but that was by far the most traumatic and the one that was felt most invasive and the one that felt most life threatening and life compromising. And I decided I wanted to become a doctor for a couple reasons. One is because I felt like I'd experienced what it's like to be a patient,
Mhm.
which I think is important for a doctor to understand. And also, I was, to be quite honest with you, I was very frustrated and kind of angry, actually, at the fact that this had happened. And I kind of attributed it to maybe the doctor is not really listening to me or maybe taking too scientific of an approach. And so I ended up majoring in psychology. in undergraduate while doing pre-medical studies because I really wanted to understand human behavior, human psychology, and to be the type of doctor that could really understand the more human emotional side of things.
I love that.
Yeah. And that's what eventually, that was the path I followed, and then eventually matriculated to the Georgetown School of Medicine
Okay.
a couple of years after graduating.
Oh, well. Wow. That's really impressive that you would want to go into it in that way, not just, I want to get things diagnosed. You want to really understand people as a whole. That's really awesome. So then what happens? How do you end up dropping out?
Well, yeah, it sounds like a nice story so far. Unfortunately, and this is what actually got me interested in the topic of career change, is I had been going down this path for a long time at this point. So you spent years going through the pre-medical program. You invest a lot of time studying for the MCAT, which is a whole day examination. You do all the interviews, you get into medical school. It's hard to get into medical school. And as you're going through this process, or as you're trying to pursue any sort of a goal, you can sometimes ignore some of the signs that you see along the way that suggest that maybe you're on the wrong path.
You share some of those signs?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I spent most of my summers in undergraduate university. I went to Northwestern University near Chicago, known for its pre-medical program. And I didn't spend my summers doing fun stuff. I spent my summers essentially kind of bolstering my medical school application by working in medical laboratories. I worked at the National Institutes of Mental Health. I found it to be an interesting experience, but I remember feeling really depleted at the end of each day and kind of de-energized and almost bored by the content.
And not
I
interested to keep moving forward with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I kept doing it. Next summer, I went to San Diego School of Pharmacology at the medical school, and I remember literally falling asleep when I was doing lab work because I was just not engaged with it, and I was not interested in it at all. But I was just plowing ahead, and I just chose to ignore it because it just felt really inconvenient at the time to deviate
Yeah.
from the
Okay.
plan. It kind of felt like it was going to disrupt what felt like a pretty nice narrative.
I'm sure you thought, well, this makes sense. This is my story. This is my past.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So got to medical school, and when you're in the gross anatomy classes and you're in the basement dissecting cadavers, that is when the rubber hits the road, and that is when I felt at least that I was completely in the wrong place. And it wasn't dissecting cadavers that bothered me. It was what seemed to me to be quite a robotic, almost mechanical process that many of the students were following to just memorize a lot of facts and body parts and diseases. And it just reminded me of the kind of mechanical approach that I was critiquing myself as a patient. And I just felt like I was kind of suffocating a part of myself, like a creative part of
Yeah.
myself. So
It's interesting, though, that you wouldn't take that to see that, wow, everybody's being trained in this very mechanical, robotic way. Maybe I can be this very individualized, unique doctor that takes on this different, less mechanical approach. Like, I feel like that
yep,
would have been me.
that makes a lot of sense. I did attempt at the time to exercise what I felt was more of my, I guess, creative side. And I spent a few months prior to going to medical school as a news anchor for Hawaii Public Radio.
Love
And
it.
yeah, one of the things that I was interested in doing was documenting the medical school student's journey.
Okay.
And I was going to create this audio documentary, and I thought it'd be this cool thing for all of us to look back on and kind of to capture our evolution as students to becoming doctors. And that very quickly got shut down by the administration. And I was literally like pulled aside and told to not do this. And I can understand why. They, I guess, were concerned about privacy, or this is way before podcasts and audio
Yeah.
broadcast. It was way before any of this stuff. This is 2002.
Okay.
And it just convinced me that there wasn't a lot of room for deviating from a very specific path where your intent as a medical student is not to kind of exercise all these creative liberties. It is to pass the exams, memorize the body parts, memorize the diseases, memorize the diagnoses, and to be able to diagnose accurately and precisely. And that's exactly what a lot of students were doing quite well. They were memorizing facts in a way that I felt I couldn't. And
Hmm.
and then I
I feel like
decided
your
to leave.
creativity, though, could still thrive in the way of connecting dots for patients that other doctors just can't. Because sometimes I see exactly what you're saying, where clearly they've memorized all the things, but they're just not thinking outside of the box.
Right. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think that it would have been incredible if I could have powered through it. And I actually admire the medical students, and I'm sure there are doctors out there who are able to take a more integrative approach
Yes.
with this very philosophy in mind. I just didn't have it in me, to be
Okay.
honest. I didn't
Okay.
feel like I could do it. Yeah.
All right. So you quit 2 weeks in, right?
Yeah, I quit 2 weeks in. Yep. There's a reason for that. Is after 2 weeks, you not only lose your deposit, your medical school tuition deposit, the
Okay.
majority of it, but it also means that there's not another student who can take your place.
Okay.
And I was told that if you get out now, they actually offered a leave of absence initially. They said if we could actually have another student come in, and that to me was very important because I didn't want to
Okay.
just. There's a lot of people who want to become doctors and should become doctors, and I didn't want to cost another aspiring medical student
Yeah.
their space in medical school.
Yeah. You just knew your heart wasn't in it.
Yeah, I just decided to cut my losses. Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens after that?
What happens after that is I'm in Washington, D.C., and to be honest with you, my life's kind of a total mess at that
Okay.
because I had been on this very linear path toward becoming a doctor,
Uh-huh.
and that was now out the window. So it was a period of time. I'd say those 3 years were probably the lowest point in my career because I had no idea what I wanted to do instead of medical school.
Mhm.
I knew medical school wasn't quite right for me, or at least I thought I knew that, but I didn't know what else to pursue. And so I
Mhm.
kind of just dabbled in a bunch of different things.
Is this where your mess becomes your message, as they say, or was it not really
A,
like that?
a little bit. I'd say it took a while. It took a
Okay.
while. I'd say it
Okay.
took a solid 3 years for me to sort stuff out. It didn't just happen. I went and worked for a health policy consulting firm in Washington, D.C. It was okay. I thought it was fine work. I hadn't let go of the medical school idea, so I continued to explore other paths, like maybe becoming a dentist. I was an emergency medical technician for a while. I thought maybe there's some other version of this that would be palatable to me, but I couldn't make it work. And so eventually I got interested in branding of all things, because I took on a side project at work where I was working on renaming the company's name at the time, which
Mhm.
was Health Strategies Consultancy, now Avalier Health in Washington, D.C. And I loved it. I loved the branding. I loved the idea of reinventing a brand and rebuilding a brand. And that got me into the next chapter of my career. And I spent about 10 years working in brand marketing. So
Okay. All
that's kind
right.
of what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And then how did you end up becoming this career change consultant?
Well, I worked for a few years in household goods marketing. So I worked for the Clorox company. I was marketing things like bin liners, and in the UK we call them bin liners. In the US they call them trash bags, and a drain opener. So I worked for Glad trash bags. I worked for a liquid plumber drain opener, and actually found that really interesting.
Okay.
Moved to the UK because my then girlfriend, now wife, was based in the UK,
Okay.
and I marketed, of all things, luxury desserts. And I started working for a company called Goo, which is a luxury desserts brand in the UK.
Okay.
And then I worked for Haagen-Dazs on their
Mhm.
global communications team. And on paper, all this sounded great.
Mhm.
Working for a large established company, in a high profile global role, marketing a really well-known global brand. But I just, after a few years of doing this, I just didn't find it very fulfilling
Mhm.
anymore. And in fact, if we just go back to kind of the medical topic, the year I got married, which was 2012, that same year my father passed away. And this is when I was working on Haagen-Dazs.
Mhm.
And I felt like most of my life at that time, my working hours were spent trying to get more people to eat more ice cream. And my father actually, he died of heart complications.
Oh no.
And so I felt like, what am I doing? How can I be marketing a product that I know isn't good for people? Like, no
Yeah.
matter how you cut it, ice cream's not
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah.
And so that just caused a real incongruency in my life.
Mhm.
And I just felt like also the corporate world wasn't quite working for me anymore. And so
Mhm.
I decided to leave that behind. And I had been doing a coaching course on the side at that time. And I really enjoyed the coaching. And so I decided to pursue that full time
Okay.
afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where the transition happened into the career consultant.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I then started working in career consulting, and I was focused on enabling and helping people relaunch their careers, similar to how I might help a brand relaunch its identity. And I found that a lot of the principles of branding and marketing could be applied to people. And so I was coaching people who were interested in pursuing more meaningful career paths.
Mhm.
And that is now the work that I've been doing for the past decade or so. I've been doing this since 2013. And I do primarily speaking and workshops.
Mhm.
I also do a little bit of one-on-one coaching. I host a podcast, and I do some writing for a couple publications.
So what is it that you help people with, or what do you say to people when they're trying to rebirth themselves? They're, like you said, same as you, where you just weren't feeling fulfilled and you want to make some sort of transition. How do you help somebody make a transition if they don't know what that transition is?
So there's a couple stages of this, Andrea, where you have somebody who the typical person I hear from if they're approaching me individually is somebody who knows they're dissatisfied with their work, very similar to me, knows they don't want to be doing what they're currently doing, but don't know what they want to do instead.
Mhm.
And so therein lies the dilemma
Yep.
is, do I continue doing what I'm doing right now? So it's kind of like a known unpleasant experience.
Mhm.
Or do I take a risk and do I take a leap and try to pursue something else, not knowing whether it's going to be better or maybe it's going to be worse? Maybe this is as good as it gets. So part of the work that I do with people is to try to help them understand what's important to them at this particular chapter in their career.
Mhm.
So part of that can involve understanding what your priorities are, clarifying what's important to you right now, understanding your values, also thinking about what's practical for you. What do you think is a move you could make that's feasible within the
Mhm.
scope of your skills and your experiences?
Well, I think the whole practical piece is interesting because something I hear a lot is people wanting to make a transition, but they have a family and they have
Right.
bills and they have a mortgage and they have all these things and their job is paying for that. And, when you make a transition, you're low man on the totem pole or you're starting your own company, but still same situation. Nobody just jumps from their job that's paying all the bills to something that's making even more, typically, right?
Yep.
I think that's a lucky transition if you go from that.
Right. Yeah. The practical side of it is really important. So it's very easy in theory to say, I'm just going to go pursue my dream career. But you're
Mhm.
right. You got to think about what skills do you bring to the table?
Is there a way to make a segue? Like, is there
Yeah.
something you tell people and guide them on how they can kind of make a segue and bridge the two? Like, keep doing what you're doing, but here's how we're going to get you ready for that next jump.
So first of all, I think it's really important that you take an assessment of exactly what skills you feel are relevant to your future role. Identify what is missing
Mhm.
from those sets of requirements from your target role. This presumes you know kind of what you want to do
Mhm.
to skill up when necessary, but also a lot of it is being able to control your narrative and to go through your skills and experiences. Try to selectively pick out those skills that you feel are most relevant to your future role and to communicate that to other people. I mean, actually, the very first person you've got to convince of your narrative is yourself.
Mhm.
Because if you're not clear on the transition that you're trying to make and the skills that you bring to the table, it's very difficult to then convince somebody else of these things.
Mhm.
So part of it is just getting really clear on your narrative and not feeling this temptation to explain away what you think is maybe irrelevant to somebody, especially
Okay.
if you're a non-traditional candidate, but to embrace that and to talk
Mhm.
about what makes you different
Mhm.
and what's something unique that you bring to the table.
So, do you have a blueprint or very specific steps or questions people ask themselves when they're making this transition to decide, am I ready?
There's a few, I guess there's both the emotional and there's the practical.
Mhm.
And both are really important. So just to give you a sense of a few, if we just kind of go through the practical steps first,
Okay.
is one question is, do I feel like I can either bring a set of skills to the table or amass a set of skills that will help create a bridge from where I am right now to where I want to go?
Mhm.
Do I feel like I have a way of reaching these desired target opportunities? Am I at a place in my life right now where I could weather the transition, where maybe I'm going to take a financial hit for a while, or or perhaps there's going to be some upheaval in my life. Do I feel like I can weather that right now,
Mhm.
financially and practically?
Mhm.
And another really important question to ask from a practical standpoint is, are the people in my life also on board with this transition? Because you've got maybe a partner or even kids or other people who are affected by your decision, and they may just not be, they may not want to stomach it. They may not have the stomach for it. And so those are some things to think about. But I think equally, there are some emotional questions to ask yourself around, do I feel like the current situation is one I can continue to tolerate? Or is it time for me to cut my losses and move on? And there's a lot around, am I willing to let go of my former identity? Am I comfortable with that? Or or is this something that important for me to hang on to maintain that continuity in my career? So those are a few things to
Okay.
consider.
Do you help people feel more inspired with their current situation instead of making a change? Because if
Well,
making a change just isn't appropriate, like you're saying, if
yeah,
you're going through all these questions and thinking about it, it's like, okay, family's not on board with it. I don't have all the skills quite yet, and I
yeah.
shouldn't be making this transition. Is there something you do to help people kind of begin to feel more satisfied with what they're doing?
Well, that you're absolutely right. That's the other option. You can either change your circumstances or you can change your attitude about your circumstances. And either can work. Either can really work. And if you feel like you're not in a position to move, then it then requires you to either tweak your current situation or make adjustments to your current situation, to think about, is there a way that I can carry on in my current situation that would be palatable to me? So perhaps that's making a tweak to my project scope, or perhaps it's trying to realign myself with a team or a manager that I feel maybe I resonate better with, or that aligns more with my skill set. Or perhaps it's even just shifting, not necessarily your job function and title, but shifting the industry that you work within. Or perhaps trying to find a way to shorten your commute if the logistics of your job are getting in your way. So I do think that small tweaks can make really significant big changes. And it's actually useful to start there to see if you can fix your current situation before you make some overhaul of your entire career.
Well, and I've seen people too where they feel undervalued,
Mhm.
but they also haven't asked for a raise. And I've talked to some people about that, and it's been pretty interesting to watch people go back and ask for this raise and, "Oh, well, yeah, they gave it to me because they looked at things and they realized they haven't given me a raise in 10 years, and, oh,
Right.
I got it." And suddenly, when people have more money, they feel a little happier
Little
with what
things
they're
like that
doing.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, ultimately, like, sometimes people are really frustrated just because they don't feel recognized in the workplace, or they don't feel valued, they don't feel seen in the workplace, and even just finding a way to feel more recognized, to feel more valued in an organization can make enough of a difference to drive up your satisfaction. And so there are tweaks that people can make. I did that myself in my career. I tried to, when I was first working in coaching, I was trying to add some projects onto my workload, and my manager was on board with this, where I could get involved with coaching in the company and the organization. So that can help on the fringes sometimes.
Definitely. So, do you have a blueprint that you give people, or is each person treated as an individual when they're trying to make this career change?
Each person, if I'm working with somebody individually, I don't do as much individual coaching these days, but when I did, I really feel like everybody's situation is unique, but there are steps that people do and stages that people go through, that if you can identify what that stage is, that's a really good starting point. So, for example, I talk about the 7 stages of career change, for example, and we don't have to go through all those right now, but one of those stages is this mitigation stage, where you're trying to fix things, you're trying to tweak things. And knowing that you're in that stage can help you identify some steps to take right now. Another stage is the exhaustion phase, where you've already been through the mitigation, you've tried to fix things, you've tried to tweak things, and it's just not working. You can't keep going on like this. Then you need to think about, well, what's my potential exit strategy? So there's a stage of reflection where you might be between jobs. And in that case, you may want to spend some time thinking about some of those points that I mentioned at the beginning, like your values, your
Mhm,
key priorities.
mhm,
And so I wouldn't say it's a blueprint, because everybody's career is unique,
mhm.
but there are themes and there are patterns that do arise with people. And once you can try to identify what barriers are standing in your way, you can then try to address those barriers.
What are the most common themes and patterns that arise for people?
Well, I'd say one of the most common ones is feeling like your identity is directly linked to your job. So
Mhm.
feeling like if you leave this job behind, I no longer have value as an individual because I'm letting go of the thing that shows up on my business card that I felt really proud of for so many years.
Okay.
So that's one thing that comes up a lot. So it's this sort of like pride or identity. Another
Mhm.
one is just walking away from investment. I think it's very difficult
Mm.
to cut your losses when you've invested time and energy and effort into something. So that
Very
comes up a
true.
lot.
So,
Then
okay.
mhm.
So how would somebody deal with that? Because I think that's something I could hear a lot of people saying, "Yeah, I spent my life training for this job, or I've spent my life
Yep.
just working up the ladder with this company. Aren't I crazy to just walk out now?"
So this goes back to identifying what your priorities are. So
Right.
there's trade-offs to everything. So I think there's costs to every choice and there's benefits to every choice.
Okay.
So if you choose to stay in a current if you're choosing to stay in your current organization right now and you're not happy or you're feeling like really unfulfilled by the work, it feels meaningless to you, you just have to ask yourself the question, is maintaining that identity more important to me than having professional fulfillment? And if it is, then maybe you choose to stay.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's useful to ask yourself the question, what do I maintain by staying? Like, what does
Right.
that do for me? What opens up for me if I choose to leave? And how important are each of those things to me?
Mhm.
And if what's keeping you in your organization is, I'm sure there's something keeping you in your organization. Let's just say it's money. Okay. If that's what's
Healthcare.
keeping you, healthcare benefits, like corporate perks,
Yeah.
free food in the cafeteria, I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if that's keeping you in your current role, you just have to ask yourself, how important is that to me?
Mhm.
And if by leaving, I then get to have, I don't know, let's just say it's better work life balance, or I get to lead a healthier lifestyle because my health, I sometimes hear from people that their health is being compromised because of the sheer volume of their work and they're
Mhm.
just miserable and their bodies are in bad shape.
Mhm.
If protecting your health, maintaining your health, spending more time with your kids, being able to tuck them in at night, if that's more important to you, then you may need to think about making a move. But
Mhm.
you have to get clear on what do you gain by leaving? What do you maintain by staying and what's the relative importance of those two things?
Do you believe that if they stick with their passion and their purpose, that you can help them find a career where they can have more than what they already have?
I don't like to talk in absolutes, so I
Okay.
don't think in every case if you just follow your passion and if you just follow your interests, that means you're going to have a fulfilling career. There is a practical overlay here where let's just say I like photography, for example. Okay, I'm not very good at photography right now. Like I don't know if I could become a professional photographer. I don't know if I could make a satisfying enough of a living as a photographer, even though I really enjoy doing it. So I, I don't know if that equals fulfillment for
Okay.
me. I
Okay.
do think though that when in doubt, if you're pursuing a path that you feel energized by, if you're excited by it, if you
Mhm.
feel like you can contribute a lot of energy into it,
Mhm.
I do think that with enough patience and persistence and effort,
Mhm.
you can create a life for yourself that you feel works better for you.
Mhm.
I think the chances of you being happier are much greater if you follow that as your
Yeah.
compass versus maybe chasing something that seems good on paper, whether it's a fancy title or money.
Mhm.
I think you're much more likely to find fulfillment if you pursue what energizes you.
Yeah, and like you're saying, though, it is important to ask yourself, like, what do you really need? What are you really looking for? Because
Yeah,
if it's financial freedom or you're looking for a lot of money, you gotta look at, okay, but my passion is whatever it be. If it's something super simple where, like, not too many people have ever had a successful living with that,
exactly. Yeah.
you gotta be realistic, right?
Right. So there's a few things. I mean, you'd asked about blueprints before. There's a few questions you can ask yourself if you're trying to figure out, is this path viable? And
Mhm.
there's probably four questions I would ask myself if I was trying to assess how realistic something is. So one is, d- do I have credibility in that space? Like, would people see me as a credible individual in that space?
And
You
it's still okay to spend the
it,
time getting that credibility before
that's
you.
correct.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely. You can amass the credibility over time, but it might just not be like for me, I was always very interested in coaching. I was interested in coaching when I was doing my business degree. And what some people told me at the time was people aren't going to be able to take you seriously unless you go amass some experience in the corporate world. And
Yeah.
so I spent a few years doing that. So
Right.
but it's important to ask yourself, can I be credible in this space?
Hmm.
Number two, can I reach the people that I see as my either potential employers or my potential customers, depending on what kind of path you want to take, whether you want to work full time or whether you want to be an entrepreneur. Number three, can I make money doing this? Like, is this something that I could earn enough of a living doing where I could be financially viable? And number four, are people out there willing to pay for this service?
Hmm.
Because if they're not, then you're probably stuck at that point. And so none of these are deal killers, but if all four aren't in place, you might start to run into a bit of a wall at
Hmm.
some point.
Okay.
But that's just kind of a starting point.
Yeah. Great. I think it'd be very helpful to have somebody like you in someone's corner when they're trying to make that transition, just somebody that's kind of checking in with them along the way. Are you asking these questions? What are the answers? And making them aware of their answers, because sometimes people just aren't aware of their own answers to
Yeah,
something and the ramifications of their answers.
right.
And so,
I found Andrea that when people are trying to make changes, it's very difficult to break away from the inertia that you have been maintaining
yeah.
in your career and your life. It's way easier to hold on than it is to move on.
Hmm.
And I've been doing this work now for over a decade. I have found in general, it's not until things get really bad that people actually make the change. That people are
Hmm.
pretty good at tolerating things for a while if they're not that bad. It's when things get real. It's similar to the medical diagnoses we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier.
I was thinking that.
It's only when the symptoms get really, really bad where you can't sleep at night, where you've got a health scare, where your partner is complaining because you're not present at night, where your kids never see you. Like it's like things that really compromise things that are very important to you.
Yeah.
It's only when things reach that point that people feel prompted and inspired and motivated to make a change because change takes a lot of effort.
Yeah. I just think it's important for people to stop and think about the end of life, because it will come to an end at some point. And are
Yeah.
you going to have regrets? How did you feel the last 20, 30, 50, whatever it was? I think it is important for people to do that. And I tell people to imagine their life like a movie and kind of step out of it and just watch it replay in your mind. And do you enjoy watching this movie? Is it something you're
Yeah.
smiling about, or are you watching it like, oh my gosh, not this part, not this part? And you're not
Hmm.
enjoying it. I think it's really important for people to reflect before it's too late.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I have read a similar exercise in, I can't remember which book I read that in, but something around observing yourself as a third party viewer, as
Yeah.
if you were like a character in a movie. And if you were
Mhm.
that hero character, h- like how would things be going for you? Like,
Yeah.
would you enjoy what you see? Or would it
Yeah.
just like really frustrate you as if you were like, come on, like make
Yeah.
your move. This enough is enough.
Yeah. Are you watching parts thinking, ugh, wish I would have done that differently. Wish I would have done that differently.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
okay if you're watching it and seeing it that way, it's okay. But that's your wake up call to make a change, and don't let it keep going that way.
Right. It's all
Yeah.
very complicated, Andrea,
Mhm.
because popular media and popular press tends to glorify the idea of sticking with things and sticking things out, being persistent, never giving up, never giving in.
Mhm.
And so this is what movie plots are built off of, is
Yeah.
like the
My
hero
my
that
gypsy
never
soul
gives
is,
up.
yeah, my gypsy soul is like, "No, no, no. Live it up."
Let it go. Well, no, that's good. That's a
Yeah.
very healthy perspective. I think a lot of people out there feel like they need to finish what they started.
Yeah.
And not doing that means that they've quit and that they've failed.
Mm.
And I've certainly
But that's
I've
the
certainly
thing.
felt that way. Yeah.
But that's such a huge thing to look at. Why do you even feel that way in the first place? Why do you feel like it's so important that you finish what you started with something? I mean, I'm not saying it's not important to finish things that you start, but what is it that they started and why did they originally start it? And sometimes I think if you go back in time and look at why you started something in the first place, you can realize I shouldn't have started it anyway. So yeah,
That's true.
I'm gonna let it go.
That's true. Yeah, it takes stepping back from being in it sometimes to be able to see it in
Yeah.
such an objective way.
Yeah.
I do think it's just going back to my psychology days, like humans are very loss averse, and they do tend
Yes,
to want to avoid letting go of things.
for sure.
And yeah, humans are very good at hanging on.
Yeah.
They're not very good at moving on and letting go.
Yeah. Well,
But it's a good question you
easier.
asked. Like, well,
Yeah.
why? Why is that? Like, why can't you just let go of it and just
Yeah.
move on and not fixate on this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real conundrum. I think
Well,
that many
it's
people are
easy to
in.
hang on. It's easy to just keep doing what you've already been doing, right? I
Right.
don't I don't need to even think. You're in robot mode. Just keep doing
That's
what
right.
you're doing.
It's a
Mhm.
known situation. You at least you know what you're dealing with. I think the unknown is it can be very daunting for people
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
grasp the unknown and to wrap their heads around that.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your story too about how you ended up where you are today and how people can begin to make that change. If people want to find you, where can they find you?
So, a couple places, Andrea, if you're just interested in reading more about personal branding or career change, you're more than welcome to check out my website, which is josephliu.co. And if you want to hear stories of how other people have changed career paths, then feel free to check out my podcast called Career Relaunch. And that is at careerrelaunch.net and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, all over. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.